do is go to this diet, and we did go over and talk about reports that you can use in NDS. Just as a quick summary, I made my cursor bigger, so I filled it in with one of my favorite colors, my alma mater. So in NDS, you basically can create a report. Again, somebody said mine isn't feeling like yours because they didn't have a batch amount here. So you can do a report, and what I'd want to do is set this as my fluctuating amount. This is probably review for a lot of people, but you can keep the batch unchanged here and hand round these if you would like. But this is a report you can do. This is a mix report. Again, hopefully we covered that the other day. There's a ton of recipe reports, and you can pull a recipe report, and what it can show you is anything you choose. There's a multi-report here. You can choose however many reports you want to make in here. And again, that's not for the discussion we're going to have right now, but I just wanted to completely go through that. There's a mixer wagon report here so that you can decide whether you want to go by head or by amount. Change the ingredients around. Corn silage, of course, would go in last. We'd put, corn silage would go in last. And we'd probably put the hay or something in first. You can change that. Once you change the mixer wagon report and come back and save the recipe, the mixer wagon order and the order in your screen will be saved as two different settings. So quick discussion about those reports: a batch, a recipe, a mixer wagon. What I really wanted to talk about was going into whole herd reports. So in order to go into a whole herd report, we need to go into the herd, which is in the recipe area, not the farm structure. So if I'm going to open up a farm, and here's my farms, what I can do is I can do reports right now by clicking, right mouse clicking on the farm. And this probably, I should have blown this up as a PowerPoint, but to be interactive, I just wanted to show it. But you can create recipe reports. The first two options are a recipe multiple report and then a recipe one-page report. I want to go over those first. So if I choose the recipe multiple report, what I can do is I can go in here and I can pick, I'm going to go back here and pick this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that fresh cow and the high cow. Oops, not that one. I want that one. And that's all I want to show. And then within my recipe page, I can choose any of those reports that I've built as my options here. So probably if I'm going to go walk this dairy, I will choose the consultant report. And what it does, it is saving this to my last area, but it will usually save that in my external files. This is all discussed in that PDF on that, showing that. So now it will save where I want it to save down here in the example dairy. So now I'm going to do these two recipes in a report in a one-page PDF of those two recipes. And it takes a little while to go through and load those for me. But now I have a multiple page recipe report. So here's the fresh cow recipe. I am using the consultant report like I wanted, but here is the fresh and here's the lactation. So this can be sent as a one PDF, 2-page kind of report. So it's 2 rations on 1 PDF, and I can send that to a producer like that. If I go back to NDS and say, well, I want to do the second option, which is I want to create the recipes in a 1-page report, I can choose this option. It's picking up that other. My mouse is way too big now. So now here is the demo and the lactation, not that one, let's do that one. Now I'm going to create both of those in a 1-page report. And so as it's thinking, it's going and looking at those 2 reports, those 2 recipes, and putting them on 1 page. And here we go. Here's fresh ration. Here's the lactation ration. Over in options and utilities, I can put this on the landscape page. I can even choose what to show and what not to show. So under options here, under properties, orientation, I can change that to the landscape, but under properties, I have different options I can show down here as far as don't show any nutrients, show the recipe cost, show on an as fed, very different options here for this. And then again, the really neat thing that the programmers and the RUM&N team did is I can go create a PDF of this, create it, and it will usually drop it within that that same dairy. I'm getting a little crossways from all the work I'm doing, but it will usually drop that right into that external file structure. So again, what we saw was, hey, you can create 1 page or 1 PDF with multiple pages, 1 page per each recipe, or you can create all the recipes on 1 page. And just 2 different options there looking at that. So the next thing I want to pull down and go through is, so if I created a mixer wagon report for each of those recipes, I can create the multiple mixer wagon report. That mouse is way too big. So now I'm going to do the same one and the same one and generate that report. And it will create the 2 last pages of mixer reports that I kept. I must have only created 1. I didn't create the other. So if I create the mixer report, save it, come back to this, it will allow me to send another PDF of 1 PDF with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of the mixer reports as 1 report. So those all pertain to the ration. So the multiple report creates 1 PDF, 1 recipe per page. I can put all the recipes on 1 page. This creates the mixer wagon multiple report. So that gives me some flexibility of how do I send those reports back to the dairy. So I can do it quickly and easily. I'm going to jump over this herd economics. We're going to do that in a minute because I want to touch base on this summary of the ration or the herd's excretion and greenhouse gas. And what I want to do is go back and go back to my recipe. And here's the recipe. And I was going to ask Kurt if he can chime in and help me go over this excretion tab for the individual.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can, and I think I can give keyboard and mouse control to Kurt.
All right, let's click on excretion. You there yet? There we go. So this tab is becoming more and more important, and Mike Van Amberg mentioned it in the meeting we had last week that he is spending even more of his time dealing with very large organizations asking for good predictions, more precise predictions on greenhouse gas emissions from dairy cattle, and it's becoming something that we really need to deal with and be able to track. And it's good to be able to speak with you all to help us start tracking this on farm. Just as a personal aside, I'm here in Vermont, and we've got a very large maple sugar industry, and forest owners are being approached by companies in the West looking to buy carbon credits. And they're paying foresters not to forest their land in exchange for their ability to buy the carbon credit. One thing to keep in mind, and Mike mentioned this and made it really clear, a lot of our dairy is based on photosynthetic carbon. We grow forages and we feed them, and that carbon cycles within the cow and on top of our planet. We do use fossil fuels in production of a lot of our feeds and transport, and there is a clear distinction between fossil fuel carbon and greenhouse carbon. And what we're dealing with here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Armano, is the greenhouse gas emissions, more photosynthetic emissions on a dairy farm from a particular ration. And Andrew pointed out in his protein talk, looking at nitrogen efficiencies, and we got a good perspective on those. Dave's got a good diet here, productive N of 1.1, productive total N of about 33%. But as we go further over, we can look at methane emissions, and I don't even have a good idea of what we should be aiming for other than looking at this chart that NDS provides based on quite an array of research papers that vary in their predictive equations. This is the CNCPS prediction to let you know if you're above or below, basically, are you a high emitter of methane or a low emitter of methane? And it might be interesting to start tracking this for individual farms. When the day comes and they need to document it, we hope to be prepared with some information, at least baseline, that's been generated by people within our industry and interested in accurately predicting this. So I think that's worth noting. Again, this is for an individual diet, and I hate to give the rumen crew any more homework, but maybe we should start a whole farm page on tracking some of those emissions as well.
You could do that, man.
Did I just get in trouble?
I think we have that ability, but going from where you were to where we're going, and we met with Andrew how long ago, and this whole idea of productive nitrogen and everything, we've heard about it and stuff, and it wasn't until 6-7 months ago when you and I got with him that I actually started looking at it, trying to really get this over. Heck, I was below 1-to-1 on the ratio a lot of times. So that all being said, what I really want to do is open up, again, if we go to main, go to recipe page, and I want to go look at the whole herd excretion and greenhouse gas emission here. So again, what the program can do is it can do the math for you as far as where we are on this herd, because we have it by individual cow, by individual group, and we've done all that mathematics on one. So here we set with a really cool little sheet. I think I can make this bigger. I'm not sure if it helps that much on the projection, but the idea is probably have 75 head. And then what I can do is change all my numbers down here. 500 cows, I'd probably have calves on milk. I'd probably have 50. I'm just going to change the numbers. 100 of these, 100 of these, and 200 of these. And then what I can do is go down here and hit the recalculate. And what it does is it actually looks at the herd, cumulative herd numbers here. And it's auto calculating that just by putting your amounts in. And then again, if this herd is, changing, milk production, they're 60 and 90, we can recalculate that as far as where we are on production and intake. So phenomenal little tool here. And again, showing this to somebody up in the Northeast one day, they were just blown away that, they had their NP and K numbers right here. But if we can use this as a proactive tool, I'm really thinking this has got some really cool benefits for us going forward, being proactive in our profession. Again, put it in a report, put it in an Excel. We have been printing this out on a couple big dairies, so they've got it in their notebook. People haven't asked in our area yet, but we are in tune with what the numbers say, and just again trying to do this proactively. All right, so we did that. I want to click on a couple more of these. So here we are in that example. So we did greenhouse gas. Romano, do you want to comment any on this water footprint? These two I'm not real familiar with, so we sure can.
It is just an attempt to have an idea about the water footprint of the whole farm. Of course, we are considering the drinking water and the metabolism of water of the single pan, and some other evaluation at the bottom. But again, it is an attempt to evaluate the water footprint together to the greenhouse gases you just described.
Okay.
The concept is the same, but it is focused on water.
Yeah. And the nice part is that, you have some references here and where you got that information. Anywhere where there's an eye on there, if you hover over that, that will give you an idea of where those ideas and thoughts are. So again, metabolic drinking water recipe, just another function in that the idea of putting this herd together as far as pins. It's usually reading the last diet you did for a pin. There's a little function in the setup to where you can deactivate a pin. from these reports, but let's keep going down here. Greenhouse gas certification. I haven't used this or haven't looked at it, but again, it's just a validation of what's going on through the rations and the excretion the way we have it put up. You want to comment on that one, or?
Yeah, what does that certification mean? What?
It's just some farms here are here in Italy are asked to generate some of the basic information about their excretions, and we put together just a kind of non-official certificate about the whole farm.
Nice.
Again, nothing official, but just to make the farmer aware that we can start to provide these numbers, and we can reference how robust they are based on the CNCPS model and some other additional evaluation we do in this session.
This looks official. You know, that looks good.
Not exactly official, but quasi-official.
Yeah, quasi. So again, I've never used this standard dry matter intake, Romano.
Okay.
While I got you on here,
this is something we developed for the feeding center. The feeding center needs to standardize when they prepare the wagons. They have to standardize the dry matter in the dry matter included in each diet in order to standardize wagon preparations, and after that they can feed group by group or farm by farm based on the percentage of the intake. You have to set up the standard dry matter intake through parameters. Go to utility. Go to utility tab, parameters. You can see there is standard intake at the bottom. Okay, click on lactating. Each animal type can have their specific standard intake. For example, when we work in Israel, the feeding center there are preparing the diet based on 20 kg of dry matter intake. And based on this, that report regenerates the diet in order to standardize the intake based on this input.
and that's relating to this feeding center tab over here.
Yeah, it is a piece of the feeding center tool that we develop, because in some countries, not only Israel, but Far East and Russia also, this kind of activities is quite popular. So we need a specific tool to help this guy to handle diet preparation. Not diet formulation, diet preparation before they are delivered.
Yeah, okay. Couple more things over here, and I've left this one as far as the summary of the herd economics till last, but I need to back up just a hair and go through this area here. So we have pretty much all the cost in here that we've gone ahead and put into NDS. And we can go back here to our costs, look at the cost of the recipe, and look at then I have put in the milk price from the multi-component milk pricing system. And you can see I've even added the TPD for the farm. I've added his premiums that he gets for somatic cell, the deductions. I just total them all up and put them into one. So this is more or less the milk price that we had Monday at a dairy. So the tool looks at productive efficiency, across this animal or this pen, and we can go through, and the white numbers correlate to the inputted numbers here. The brown are the predictions, and in my example, there's 95 pounds of milk and a little over 95. That's why we see a set of white numbers and brown numbers, and the brown numbers are just a tad bit over because the prediction is for 0.68 more milk. The fun little graph here on production efficiency is this little icon right here. And so as you click on this, it will pop up a graph that shows the income per cow, cost per cow, the income over feed cost, income over purchase feed cost, right through here. Purchase feed cost, income over purchase feed cost. This again is covered in one of the YouTube videos that we talk about economics. Someone asked, how do you define feeds? You can go to feed details, go to feed info down here at the last, after feed details, feed info, and then from right here, you can define everything as purchased or home raised. So now I've got these items purchased, and then what I can do is save down here. Again, when I did the farm mix, it actually asked me, is everything purchased? Because if there was grain bank soybeans that I didn't, that are at the feed mill, I can describe those individually. So I click save here, and it gives me now that purchased or home raised. And so this will look a lot different now, not the total gross milk income, but over here it raised our purchase price because we are now purchasing that all from the feed mill. This is really important to get set up so that in your lactating animals that this makes sense. Because when I go to the whole farm and I go to the recipes and I want to generate a farm report, now a summary of the herd's economics, I need to have those things in place right so that now when it generates out a report like this, it makes sense. So it's reading all the recipes on that farm, and this is the value of going through the process of putting all those farms in place on the dairy. I'll try to get this a little bigger. It won't increase the font that big, but it'll just make it easier to see. So now this is the free version of the econ for the herd summary. Of course, I can change any of these groups and change any dry matter intake. The milk production for these diets is tied into what I have as my target milk. But as I go through and change any of these groups and hit recalculate, it's going to not calculate so much on the per pen, that's or the per animal, but over here for the number of animals I have for the pen or herd across here. Okay, so what's really interesting to do is start looking at this from the way the producer sees it. 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, the idea was when we ran these reports and saw these guys with these big heifer pools on their dairy, um, we realized that the opportunity was to shrink your heifer pool just to what you needed it to be so that you weren't spending extra money on that. And so this is a valuable tool to get into the world of what the dairy's doing on finances, where they are as far as return income over feed cost is all up here in your milk cows, but it's drastically diluted by the number of heifers and, freeloaders that you have on your farm. And in this example, we've got a whole bunch of heifers here. You wouldn't be doing this, but I could take this down and show you the same thing. Totally interactive on the number of dry matter pounds and heads here. So that is the free version of the herd economic report. And I don't want to save those. But what I do want to show you, we've looked at all these herd reports that are here. There are two different ones that we've developed these two different, and they're under the management reports. And these are modules that you can purchase that grab the data out of NDS that are standalone, not standalone, but additional modules, add-on modules. I'm going to go to the farm economic one, and it has some extra tools on there that I can go to all the farms. I can scroll down to my dairy example here and click on it, and it's reading the same set of information, but it just gives me a whole lot more features when I'm looking at that farm economic profile. So it's going through, reading the data, filling a population, and now it starts putting it into the cows, lactation and dry, the heifers, and then the total enterprise. And again, if I had steers as one of my pins on a farm, it would also give me some beef data enterprise numbers. So this is a really nice feature in the fact that you can start manipulating the amount of refusals in here, the actual milk. So if I chose the conventional milk price system, I can change that right here. But for right now, it's just bringing in the class 3 price and whatever I've set up for this farm with that PPD and everything. The advantage here is I can go in here and say, I've been to the dairy. We were making 95 pounds of milk across the dairy with a 3.8 and a 3.22. And we were at 5.7 on solids. I can click here. Those will become the values loaded in here. So it changes all the economics here. So what I've done is I just knew my pin or my herd data. And so it just takes all the milking cows and pops it in there. Again, I can change some of this if I know if I went to the herd easy feed watch, and that was 57 across the dairy. I can punch these numbers in here, and then I've got some numbers. Again, it's updating it, it's working through there. This sheet is expansive, and what I've done in mine is chose to hide some of the information. There's a lot of information, and we can send you a PDF if you're interested in this expanded economic information, but it just has a lot more tools and a lot more feature than the free version. And the problem I found out with dairies is if you start showing them this information, you pretty much will not leave the dairy until you've printed off the monthly sheet for this. looking at where he is on returns and everything. And again, with our example, we've got 3 times more of the heifers we need. And I can go through and correct that real fast and just show you the use of this. Should have done this on my work last night, but you can see the difference. Now you've got some more realistic numbers in here. Again, he's probably got more like 35 close-up cows, and dry cows would be close to, 65. So again, you can see if we're printing this off and understanding where the dairyman is, I think this is a valuable tool. It's just been really, one thing we have very little control over a couple of these things. When you go back to this sheet and you go back here, you can't control the milk price. You can't control the feed price. You can buy different feeds, but you can start looking at the return on some of these, feeds that we feed. And, you can start tracking, do I chase milk protein? Do I chase milk fat? What are my options? What are better feeds that I can buy? But it's kind of humbling when you start thinking we can't influence a lot of these, but we can help make decisions when this arrow is pointing back here. And, we can make decisions as consultants. Last feature I wanted to show, oops, I got 2 or 3 other ones here. Let's go to this other feature down here that's called the feed inventory report. And again, it's a different purchase set alone thing. And I really was, as we were talking about this, I was intrigued with the way Hermano was working with this. So if I go to feed inventory, and let me just go to one of my farms where we use this like crazy. So what we're doing, this is a heifer yard, about anywhere between 11 and 12,000 heads. So I can go into details and it pops open every recipe. And what I can do is I can go through here and figure out where put my PIN numbers in here. Here we go. So I think we've got 750 in here. And what I can do is then, come back here and come up with the number of heads. And then what it's giving me is the as fed pounds and dry matter pounds. And then what I've selected is 30 days here. So it'll give me 30 days as fed and dry matter tons looking at this. So the frustration factor was that due to the cold weather and all the storms, the supplier of our product here was no longer able to get product to us. So we rebalanced diets with haylage. So these are on all forage diets basically without this, distiller's kind of commodity product that we had bought. So what we do is we go through, reformulate diets, move the day up 1 day, and then it will give us those diets back with our fiber syrup product in there. A really cool tool to start working with and playing with on herds that may not have Easy Feed Watch in there. I've given this one a headache on that. That's the farm we've been working on this last week, so that's not a real farm. So that whole feed inventory thing, what it does is it looks into your date range, your farms, and then it'll go through and calculate those different diets. So again, it takes the diets here, the last diets that we have in. So here's the 600, here's the 800 pound diet, here's the short bread, here's the long bread. 450 diet, 375. Most of our diets are in there. That one diet is not coming in with anything, but I can punch my number of head in here and then recalculate that and then shrink that down. I can go through and look at all the data for each pin, but I'm really worried about my summary and trying to figure out how much we're using as fed and dry matter over that period that I'm working with the producer. And again, we take his numbers on this facility and match it up with his Feed Watch or Easy Feed. But I can change diets and then run this report and tell him the projected use next week on or next month on where we are. Smaller dairies be a phenomenal thing to make sure we're not going to run out of corn silage and haylage month to month, time to time. So that is those two things, the expanded farm economic report, feed inventory report. Again, we can send you a PDF on how those function. And again, if you're interested, we can send you what they cost. We've broken those two out so you can buy one and not the other. One more thing that I really wanted to show, and this does take a little time, and it's probably really bad to be doing this as the last presentation of the day on the last day of the week. But I'm going to go to my far off dry cows. And this is, again, something that Romano and the RUM&N team really developed that I was really tickled to death with. As we start looking at recipes and rations and how to transition a farm across all the recipes you have on the dairy, my example is I'm going to go to the dry cow recipe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the comparison tab right away. I've got the dry cow ration opened. It's representative of what we're doing on the farm. I'm going to go to the comparison tab. And the system is telling me, hey, Dave, you didn't make any changes. There's nothing to compare it to. What I can do is I can go clear over to the recipes on the blue bar in that upper left-hand corner. So this allows me to decide what recipe I want to compare this to. So from here, I can click on the recipes, and you can actually go and compare it to another close-up diet for another farm and do some looking that way. But what I'm really interested in is going in and looking. So that was the dry cow diet. What I want to do is bring in the close-up diet. And what it's doing is it's down here thinking, it's trying to load two different types of animals. So it takes a little bit of time to pull those from pin to pin. And it does take a little bit of time, but what it'll do is it'll pop this next pin up. So here we go. So now I have the dry cow diet here, the close-up diet here. And what I really want to do is keep going because I want to see how I take an animal, a far off dry cow, to freshening. So if I go back to recipes here, I can click on recipes. And then what I can do is go into the fresh diet that we have for the farm. Click on the fresh. Again, it's thinking down here below. And what's interesting, the discussion we had yesterday talking about dry cows, in the dry cows was, how do we transition animals across the dairy? And again, probably one of the real nice videos that we have up there was when Heather Dan was talking about dry cows and, she went into transition. Now you can see I'm looking at version 2 and 3. And I'm going to go one more time, go clear over to the recipe on the blue bar up here, clear over to the recipe tab. And now I'm going to go get my high cow. And I'm going to choose this high cow. Oh, coming up with a little error at the end of the day. And it kicked me out. So, Romano, you knew I was going to screw it up one of these last minutes. What I'll do is I'm going to take you over and look at some of the reports, and I've got some of those saved over here, and we'll run down here. So once I saved all those, it'll generate a report like this. So what it did is I lined up the dry cow, the close-up cow, the fresh cow, and the high cow all together. And you can see that it had some problems doing the accounting, but I didn't use the same feeds in the dry cows, of course, as I used in the fresh cow. So it lined up all these different feeds across here. What I really wanted to do was show what was going on in transition from the dry cow to the close-up cow to the fresh cow to the high cow. And again, this is a severe example that I saw on a dairy, but the starch level that was actually going in the dry cows was 24.5. Close-up cows were being fed 31.6. Fresh cows were back down to 22, and high cows were not even as high as the close-up cows. So the idea, somebody was trying to chase energy in this bunch of close-up cows. And again, we went ahead and produced a graph. In this graph, you can see, again, we have a video tutorial about transitioning cows over this set of rations. So in my label, I put dry, close-up, fresh, high. You can just see what happened. So our real goal in this is to make starch and fermentable starch a smooth transition. And this is the kind of graph that you can produce out there in NDS by that comparison function. And again, in our video tutorial, the idea of doing it across a dairy is really nice. I'm going to jump over to another slide. Hang on, let me find one. Okay, now you can see my screen again. So this was a herd that we did a troubleshoot on. Dry cows, you know, fermentable starch was down here about 11 or 10.5. Close-up cows were up at 16. High cows were up, or fresh cows were up at 18. High cows were up at, you know, over 19. So just not a very even start. So here's total starch. Oh, sorry. This was the existing diet when we came, and this one was the one we put them on. So here's the total starch on the diets they were on, which was 7, jumping up to 24, jumping up to 30, jumping up to 31. And again, this was before. And again, a lot of issues on the dairy, a lot of acidosis, a lot of lame cows, poor intake. We've been doing this approach, getting them up to 12, 18 in the close-up, 22 in the fresh, 25, 27 in the high. 18 months later, hospital pen is almost non-existent. We've got consistent intakes, butterfat the dairy's never seen before. So that is all. You can generate these kind of reports out of the NDS, and it would wait until the last day to give me a knockoff issue like that.